Welcome to the Lead with Hope podcast, where we explore habits, optimistic outlook, purpose, and excellence in leadership. I'm your host, Brandi Kelly, and today's guest is a special one. Preston Zeller is a tech leader, a documentary filmmaker, and a faith tech founder. He is the creator of Psalmlog, an AI-powered biblical guidance app, and the filmmaker behind The Art of Grieving, a documentary about his year-long painting journey after the sudden loss of his brother. In this episode, we're going to discuss how grief and creativity shaped his leadership and inspired Psalmlog. We will also explore the lessons that Preston has learned about hope and resilience through personal tragedy. So get ready. This is going to be a powerful and insightful conversation. Before we get started, I want to thank our legacy partner, Craig Williams, founder of Commissary. At Spark Hope, we believe story matters because story shapes how we lead, how we connect, and how we show up in the world. Commissary helps authors and leaders bring clarity to their story and confidence to their voice so that their brand truly reflects who they are. You can learn more about their work by visiting the link in today's show notes or on the Spark Hope website. Thank you, Commissary, for supporting the Lead with Hope podcast. Please join me in welcoming Preston Zeller. Welcome to the show.
Brandi, thank you very much for having me on and the great intro. I'm looking forward to chatting with you on everything you just mentioned and more.
Preston, we have something in common. We want to turn our pain into purpose. We've both lost a brother. And so, that's just a part of your story. It's a chapter of your story. Tell us more about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm a creative person and I'm also a very technical person. So I got that blessing of both, which sometimes can be overbearing. I kind of bounce between, I guess, logical, the super logical side of it would be a better way to frame it. But yeah, I'm a faith tech founder, as you mentioned. Also, I've been an artist my whole life and I'm an entrepreneur. So, I've spent the last 15, 16 years growing my career around, promoting, growing, developing technology companies and information products and the web and all that's evolved and now AI and making sense of all that. So, I think at the end of the day, someone who's a man of faith, a husband and a father, making sense of who I am as a whole person, not just like the person I bring to work. And what does that look like? And how can I help people in the various capacities that they do need help through my skill set? Whether that is the soft skills or the hard, technical skills that are learned. So that's really kind of the journey I'm on. And then, of course, grief, and we'll get into that, how that's shaped me over time.
You are a diverse individual, like you said, with that creative side, but also that analytical side. And so when you put all of that together, I am curious specifically how grief has entered into that equation. You and I have talked a few times pre this recording, and you've shared with me that after your brother died, you painted every day for a year. Specifically that practice. I mean, that's becomes a habit, right? That behavior becomes a habit. So what did that practice teach you about grief and more importantly, about yourself?
Yeah, and I was just I was having this realization a bit as you were just talking, because it's funny. I'm going through the book writing process of like combining, making sense of all these things, right, and putting them into a more written format versus the documentary. And I think the creative end, right, you're okay with the feelings. And because you have to feel those things to create, right? So that comes naturally to me. But then there's the sort of logical, rational side where then I want to break it all down and understand how it works. And those are weird in the sense that they're abstract concepts. I'm not approaching it merely from just a scientific level and saying, oh, there's chemical reactions and that kind of thing. And that's one way you can understand it. But I'm like, hey, I want to go into the soul and I want to understand how that's functioning. And grief and the loss of my brother provided a really incredibly difficult, yet also huge opportunity to do that in a time of life where I could do it, and I know what you went through in the early days of your loss was like much younger. That's a wildly different time frame to go through that, where you're like, I don't even know who I am, let alone, experiencing that loss. I was at a place where I was I think had the maturity to be able to do that. And the way it made sense to me was using an artistic process. And, I originally started out with like all the structure within the painting itself. I said, oh, I'm going to paint with this certain symbolism and I'm going to do it on big canvases and it's going to be really well thought out. That in and of itself was too limiting. I had to create some, I don't know, overarching structure, but where it didn't inhibit my ability to just free flow paint, expressive paint. Abstract expressionism is, I guess, the style people are looking for, or intuitive abstract. But all the same, it's just you're painting how you feel, and you have to be okay with not judging all the stuff that comes out of you at the same time. Which, man, I think it's like by the time we're 10, you become so acutely aware of everyone else's judgments of your creative work, of how you feel, of whatever it is. I see that with my own kids, how they've evolved. So, how do I not just perpetuate, I think, the boxed inness that we become as teenagers and then really solidify as adults by being in touch with myself in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And what I feel like is healthy anyways, and then showing up as a leader and understanding what other people are going through and who they are too, which I think is the thing that gets glossed over so much, is in leadership.
There's so much there, Preston. As you were talking about that, I'm thinking about our world, and our world is so noisy. And from the time that we're small children, we are learning social norms. We're learning how to act and how to react, how to behave. And fast forward to adulthood, we have all this stuff in our head. In counseling, we call them cognitive distortions sometimes, limiting beliefs, and that really fits well into the O pillar of my framework of hope, optimistic outlook, that mindset piece. It's intriguing to me, and I wish I could be a fly on the wall. I mean, for 365 days, you went into an art studio and you were just free flow painting. You were releasing the emotions. You were dealing with the grief. You were kind of, from what I'm hearing you say, taking all of those social norms and all of that judgment and just allowing yourself to look inward, focus on who you are and who you want to become as you were grieving and healing. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's a good summation of it. And in art's an interesting medium in that it's visual, right? I've been a musician for most of my life too, and I've put out my fair share of music. And music's funny because someone has to really kind of sit there and listen to it, right? Whereas like most people are visual people. You could look at something and in a split second go, I like it, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so in some ways I was also sort of bucking the trend of, at least in the social media world, artists who heavily filter their work and have this really cool produced video with a lot of motion, and you're chucking paint out of canvas or whatever, and it turns out to be this cool thing. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I knew, okay, in this amount of paintings, I want people to see the ones that are probably, you may look at it and go, this is like a 5-year-old painted it, or whatever the case is. Right. I didn't really care about that. The irony there, I'll say too, is people ended up buying prints of paintings later on that I thought were terrible. So you think you know what everyone wants, but you don't. So yeah, I think there's somewhat of a counterintuitive process there, because by not sitting there and just ruminating on the feelings that I had and letting them flow through to painting, they actually came out easier for me. And I think that's part of the message of the documentary, is to go try painting. And I've seen and heard so many people who have, because of that, who didn't think of expressive painting as a way of maybe exploring that emotions. Maybe they thought they ran out of options. And they're like, yeah, this is another thing I could try. So.
Yeah. Moving out of your comfort zone, trying something new. And I'm envisioning that maybe there are listeners out there right now, and they are wondering about these paintings and where they can see these paintings and get the visual sense of what we're talking about. Can you share that information?
Yeah. So if you want to look at all the paintings, they're on my Instagram, and because I posted them every single day while I was painting them. But if you want to, of course, see really the story behind it and sort of my experience of that, The Art of Grieving is the name of the documentary. So it's on Amazon Prime and Apple TV and a bunch of different platforms and available internationally too. And that's not like you just sitting through watching me paint 365 paintings, you know. There's like time lapses of certain paintings woven in to convey a sense of time passing. But what I think is more intriguing out of that whole process is in some ways what the end result was, which is putting all them together, which when you see in the documentary, it'll make a lot more sense, but it's a 10-foot by 20-foot mosaic of all these. And so they're all rearranged into a final image that for me depicted what it meant like to move through grief. And I think there's some amount of being okay. Like we got to be okay in uncertainty too. And that's what that was for me, because I wasn't like intentionally going, okay, here's a final image. I'm going to paint that over these canvases. That's a very different thing. It wouldn't have accomplished the same result. And life can be like that, I think, in work, in, child rearing and just relationships, where you're just taking a step forward each day. And maybe after a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, you gain clarity of, this is what all this work has led up to, this breakthrough. And knowing that it's going to take a lot longer than you probably expect it to. Yeah. At least it does for me. I'm impatient, which is actually in some ways why I laid out a long project for myself.
Yeah, patience. That is a whole nother topic that we could do another podcast on. But you talked about uncertainty. I believe we have to lead ourselves well first before we can lead our families and the people that we're serving. But when we're leading, something we need to get comfortable with is the fact that there will always be uncertainty. And you and I are both people of faith. Faith is extremely important. And Preston, that makes me think of the biblical passages where it talks about Jesus getting away and going and spending time with God, going to lonely places to spend time in relationship with his heavenly Father. And that faith practice, I think, is really important. And so for me, that's a habit that I cultivate. That really shapes my mindset and how I look at uncertainty and fear and all of the difficulties that we face in life. But for you, you have recently endeavored to use your faith to inform this tech space, to create an AI app called Psalmlog. So talk to us a little bit about how your faith has informed this process and a little bit more about Psalmlog.
Yeah. And I love what you said about getting away. There's like, you'll hear some people talk about like there's huge gaps of Jesus's life where it's like, what was he doing? He must have gone on like a lot of hikes, because he just getting away from everyone at some point, talking with God. But yeah, so I've been a Christian believer for 15 years, and I grew up in that, but really, that's been a core part of my life for 15 years. And I think like a lot of people in, our mindset, you go, okay, well, I have these certain gifts that are like endowed to you. And then you have skills that you've developed along the way. And you go, how do I make sense of this for a purpose that is really beyond me? And not making it about myself, right? And so I've wondered that, and I've launched different things in different parts of my life and been a part of, certain things at church for sure, and continue to do that. But one of the things that really struck me recently was with, so this is last January, I had this idea to use large language models to help people with journaling in Christianity, because I knew that people would keep these journals and never look back at them. And you go, wow, you have this extensive catalog of your brain stuck in books. What if that could tell you something that you're missing? And it started as that. But we soft launched August last year, and it was just a mobile app initially, and went back to the drawing board a bit to verify that what I was doing made sense, because I was all like conversations I had with prospective people. And I commissioned a study of 200 Christians and found that really what they are after is getting personalized biblical advice. And it was really because our problems don't go away as much as we'd like them to. We know the Bible has answers, but don't know where to look. Even if you spend a lot of time in Scripture, it can be hard to find that. And we're in a fast-paced culture, fast-paced life. And this 2026, it just feels, I think, a lot different than probably 100 years ago did, or 40 years ago did, pre-internet. So there's just there's a combination of factors. So it exposed to me that Psalm Log is really that, and has forced me to evolve the product to cater to that kind of need, where it could actually speak from a biblical aspect to the myriad of different things that people might come across, and making sure too that people understand that it's an assistive tool. It's not a replacement for anything, in the same way that people looked at, we watch YouTube videos, we listen to podcasts of our favorite teachers, or maybe they're just, fireside chats. We buy devotional books, commentary books. I mean, you name it, and other apps that we may have on our phone. But I don't think anyone would say, oh, this is a replacement for something. It's a way to help you understand more clearly, hey, what it is you're going through, and feel heard, and understand it. Like, where in the Bible is it talking about this subject, and how can I get clarity on it from that aspect? And there's some unique ways we do that, but that's kind of an overview for people listening.
Let's pause for just a moment, because I want to tell you about a partner who truly aligns with the heart of this podcast, Conversary. Here on Lead with Hope, we talk a lot about clarity of purpose, clarity of voice, and clarity of direction. And that's exactly where Conversary comes in. They help leaders, educators, and change makers uncover the story behind their work and share it in a way that feels honest, meaningful, and deeply aligned with who they are. If you've ever felt the nudge to write a book, refine your message, or build a brand that actually reflects your values, not just your resume, Conversary doesn't rush you or box you in. They walk alongside you, helping you shape your story with intention and integrity. You can learn more by clicking their link in the show notes, or visiting the Spark Hope website. A big thank you to Craig Williams and Conversary for being a legacy sponsor of this podcast, and for investing in stories that matter. Because when we share our stories with clarity and hope, real change happens. We were talking about uncertainty earlier. Sometimes when we start talking about AI, people don't understand it. There's a little bit of uncertainty with AI. So what would you say to those people that are a little fearful of this? They're a little bit uncertain that this is the right direction to go.
Yeah. No, it's a fair question. I think AI is the tool that God has allowed to be created, that is a tool. And I don't think, in the sense that it is a tool, it's not dissimilar from money, from a spoon that you use to feed yourself, from, these things vary in complexity too. I think with AI that I think can wig people out, right, is some aspect of the large language models. It is difficult to explain. Mm-hmm. I mean, even the creators of it, will be like, well, there's some aspect of it that's kind of just like working, and we don't really know how. And I'm not going to pretend to know either. I don't want to pretend to be a know-it-all there either. That wouldn't be good. What I would say to people too is you have to have, no matter what you're using, you have to have discernment.
Yeah.
And so whether it's AI, whether it's you walking into a new church, or picking up a book, or being gifted a book that someone gave you, you're not going to ever check your brain at the door and be like, okay, well, I guess I'll just take this as the gospel. The gospel is the only thing you take as the gospel. And so go be a good Berean and get into the word yourself. And that's really what Psalm Log is helping you do. And I'll say this too. I intentionally didn't make it in this back and forth chat format, because it's a different mindset versus in Psalm Log. What you do is you click on a journaling template. So that could range from a variety of things, and it's going to help you with a prompting question and like attach a relevant verse to your journal entry, and then you share what's going on with you, and then it'll come back with like a 5-point breakdown and the emotive side of it as well, helping you understanding in context of the Bible what it's talking about. So it's not really attempting to do like, hey, I want to explore, all the different counter arguments for annihilationism versus, eternal damnation or something like that. Like really kind of wild stuff that you could go get into the weeds on. That's not what it's for. I think people will use chat more for these long ongoing dialogues. It's really the person who wants to get a reflective view quickly. And the other thing I'll say there, Brandi, is being fearful of a technology. It's like Bible tells us not to be afraid. Like, what do we have to be afraid of? So there are people who evil has existed throughout time. We're not even supposed to be afraid of them. And it's people really at the end of the day who are going to be doing the malicious things. So anyways, and if we want to get into like the Terminator view of the future, that's a whole nother topic. But today and the day we live in, I would rather be at the forefront of it as a believer, helping equip people with the tool than someone who's not sharing the same values, but just sees Christians as a, sort of capitalistic opportunity.
So make no mistake about it, listeners. Psalm Log is not the Terminator. Psalm Log is a tool. It is a tool to help you grow in your faith. And that's what I love about it. I love the reflective nature of it. I love what you said earlier about the journaling, because there's so many people, and I was guilty of this years ago. I would write things down and then never go back and read what I had written. That's there, and it's a catalog of your thoughts and your hopes and your fears, and it really helps you to become more self-aware and to grow yourself. And that's the whole purpose, right? We want to grow and to become the person that God created us to be. I think of the reason that you created Psalm Log is to help people navigate grief and become more emotionally well, spiritually well, really the whole body, mind, body, and spirit. So for you, how do you personally cultivate hope and optimism, especially when dealing with these heavy topics and uncertainties in life?
Well, I think whether it's the grief thing or, the uncertainty of starting a business, just what the future holds, I think I go back to, okay, what can I control? Right. And that's literally me.
Right.
It's just me. And when you read about anxiety in the Bible, it's always like anxiety is really this loop of trying to control things that you can't, and then being concerned about the outcome of that, and then also being concerned you can't control it, and then it just keeps going around and around. Part of that is a control of the future. Don't have that, control of other people and outcomes. Don't have that. So taking that accountability for yourself, and this is something I go back to often, because if you really try to say, here's this big goal and it has to happen this way, and there are just infinite really variables going on in the universe. So and this is what, having faith does too, is you go, okay, if I'm going and knocking on doors and the door, I may knock maybe a little louder, a little harder, but if that door's just not opening, I'm going to skip past him and go to the next one. God's got one of these doors is going to open and lead to something else. But if I take a battering ram through that door and right behind it was an uncaged, hungry lion, what did I just do? I ignored that barrier.
Right.
And I think that's easy to do. So yeah, aside from that accountability, I of course spend time in the Word every morning and try to at night as well, and time in prayer and time around other people who can build me up. And that's, hopefully part of what Psalm Log will eventually do. It's not in there yet, but to connect people to community as well, where they may feel isolated. Maybe they're hesitant about going back and being with people who are like-minded because of church hurt or whatever it is. And so getting them out of isolation would also be a goal there.
There's a lot of hurting people in this world. There's a lot of people who are dealing with mental health issues, with anxiety, with depression. Life can be very difficult. And you brought up earlier just the idea of being an entrepreneur. And I'm learning that firsthand, Preston, right now. For 24 years, I showed up at a job and drew a paycheck. I gave 110%, but I could count on that paycheck. As an entrepreneur, you got to go out there and hustle every
Yeah.
day, and that
Mm,
paycheck is not guaranteed. So
mhm.
that makes me think about resilience. For you, that idea of resilience, how has your entrepreneurial journey helped you to develop hope and resilience in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really difficult to separate any of that from a relationship with God
Mhm.
because, I think going back to the control thing, I've found the more that I try to control, the less I'm letting God work. And for me, it's like if I have the creator of the universe on my side and I'm being like, no, I got this, like that's so stupid. I could think of or foolish would be a good biblical word. So, in terms of resilience, well, how do we get resilience? We go through hardships and
Mm.
we figure out how to come out of that stronger. And so there's another thing there, I think, which is all those hardships are opportunities to grow. And when you look at them like that, I'm not saying they're not uncomfortable and you may go through some seasonal depression, whatever it is. But knowing that there's a greater opportunity to come out stronger out of that. I love how the Bible talks about silver being refined 7 times. Seven's the number of completion, yes, but also if you actually refine real silver 7 times, you're basically guaranteed to have pure silver. That's of the highest value silver, and you would want that if you own silver. So I think keeping in mind that the hardships we go through are for our own good in many ways. And look, that's not glossing over the fact that there are some hardships that will making sense in the context of, like, especially if you're not a believer, and even if you are, human trafficking, abuse, murder, like just so many things that I'm not saying any of that's easy to deal with by any stretch, but that still you go to Romans 8:28, and I think we can come out on the other side of that stronger. But I have to be reminded of that every day. If I don't, I'm going to slip into really bitterness and a lot of other things in the world, and I'll just, I'll slip into tendencies that are not healthy. So it's that, renewing of my mind that is really important, and doing it.
That's exactly the scripture that came to my mind, Preston. And so many of these strategies that you're sharing for leadership, for life, they're rooted in the word of God. It's the renewing of your mind. We learn about that in Proverbs. There's a scripture that talks about if God be for you, who can be against you? We need to be reminded of that every day. I've written on my dry erase board in my house, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But the key there is through Christ. And so
Mhm.
developing habits and a mindset that is consistently rooting you in faith, in your relationship with Christ, having conversations like this, Preston, iron sharpens iron. We
Mm.
need to have people in our life that are helping us and helping us to remember that we need to consistently grow day over day, consistently strive for excellence. So
Yeah.
I love this conversation rooted in self reflection and faith and just getting better every single day. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people can be hard on themselves with too is the thing that you've been like going away from that maybe was dragging you down, and you have, with someone who's like an addict would call like a relapse or something, right?
Mhm.
Like, just it's okay to start over too. You're not going to be, none of us are perfect in this journey of trying to better ourselves. And I think knowing that, and that there's grace there, like it makes it okay to like fail too, and be okay with like setting big goals for yourself also, where it's going to challenge you. Look, if we stay in our comfort zone, little kids are so fascinating to watch because it's like we have to put on them, and I mean really little, right?
Right.
First steps little,
Yeah.
first year, where you go, you're gonna walk, and then you
Mhm.
you watch a kid learn to walk, and they just they face plant so many times,
Yes.
and you're just like, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. But we are going through things as adults, and I think have a trouble taking that dose of medicine, because if you really thought like, hey, I can conquer this thing that I have control over. If you really took that advice and viewed it in the way that you persist, that your child and encourage them can walk through those first steps and get that balance, what could you do with your life and turn around,
Yeah. Setting those big goals. I love that. And just that idea of, failing forward. Today I went and met my daughter for we do smoothie bowls, and she has a 3-year-old. He gets out of the car and he walks just fine. But of course, every now and again, even those 3-year-olds, they trip over their own
Yeah.
feet, face planted, So that's I've got that perfect picture in my mind of failing forward, because Jensen did it this morning. But what did we do? We encouraged him, we comforted him, we supported him, we reminded him that he's okay and he's
Yeah.
moving forward. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people that are going to support you and lift you up. And I think there's so much potential in Psalm Log, and I'm going to link it in the show notes today. So check that out. Preston, as we're finishing up our conversation today, I'm curious, what is giving you hope in the world right now?
Man, again, I can't extract anything else other than that I think despite the chaos we see, God has a plan for everything still, and it's all that plays into it. So, I know that as long as I can keep a right mind about how I'm leading my family and my community, and do that intentionally, that's the best I can do, and build, hopefully products that are going to help people in their life. Otherwise, the noise in the world, the wars, the rumors of wars, the injustices that go on, there's just only so much you can do about that. And I think you need to, if you've struggled with like ownership of yourself and your actions and everyone else is the problem, maybe take another look in the mirror and go, where have you maybe not taken accountability?
Right.
Because that's an easy one to do too, right? Is you just point to everyone around you. This is why I'm not getting what I want. Maybe that's not the case.
Yeah.
So
And think about your thoughts, because if you find yourself reverting to that
mm,
frequently, maybe that's where you need to start. I love the self reflection that you bring to this conversation, and just the fact that there's only one person we can completely control, and that's ourselves. So think about that. What is in your circle of control? Stop fretting and fussing about those things that are outside of your circle of control and focus on your circle of control. And I would encourage you, think about one small thing you can do today. Maybe it's to start a habit of opening the Bible and reading a chapter every day. Or maybe it's journaling. Something small that you can take from this podcast episode and implement as a habit in your life, and just build on that. We are all becoming the person God created us to be. So, Preston, thank you for bringing your wisdom to this podcast today. Thank you for sharing your story. And if listeners want to get in contact with you, how would they reach out to you?
yeah, LinkedIn's the best place to do that. That's where I'm most active. I have some other social media handles, but that's the best one.
Perfect. Well, his information will be in the show notes, and I hope you will check out Psalm Log and begin to cultivate a habit of faith in your life and in your leadership today. That's a wrap for today's episode of Lead with Hope. Remember, the world needs your leadership, and change starts with you. Fuel your life with hope, embrace your purpose, and shine your light for others. If this episode inspired you, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to give us a 5-star rating and share it. Every review helps spread hope and empowers more leaders to rise. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep leading with hope.